Penitentiary or prison reforms and mental illness reforms kind of went hand in hand. And that was because if you were mentally ill, if you had anything from autism to bipolar personality disorder to intellectual deficiencies of any type, you were treated as a criminal. You were considered to be cursed with unclean spirits. You were treated as a beast. You were put away and jailed in prison. So you were out of sight, out of mind of society. You were treated with incredible cruelty. And it wasn't until you have a crusader, Dorothea Dix, who travels around for 60,000 miles over 8 years and compiles comprehensive reports of just how poorly we were treating people, that this starts to turn around. This is a real early form of muckraking journalism. And the result is that we get improved institutions and we get improved laws. So here she is, Dorothea Dix. And it was her persistency that led to the reform of penitentiaries, jails, and so-called insane asylums as well. So we start to get whole new institutions to handle people with different mental abilities instead of putting them in the same jail where their deficiencies aren't totally understood by regular wardens, by regular guards. One of the biggest reform movements of the time is the Temperance movement, because it ends up building to an amendment in our federal constitution to ban the sale and manufacture of alcohol. Temperance was the movement to try to ban alcohol, and it's the idea that it was the root of all evil in society. Fights that men had, swearing that happened, adultery that happened, it was all based in alcohol. For alcohol to exist, this threatened the spiritual welfare of the family, the physical safety, and also the nicety of society as a whole. So in 1826, we see the American Temperance Society sprout up, and very soon afterwards, there's almost 1,000 other groups that are just kind of offshoots and branches, all fighting for the same goal, to ban alcohol. We get another piece of expository journalism out of this, much like Dorothea Dix's writing. We get kind of some muckraking, 10 Nights in a Barroom and What I Saw There by T.S. Arthur. So in 1854, he's talking about this happy, idyllic village that's totally ruined by a tavern, and just the people that come in and out of those doors over the course of 10 nights. He tracks the disgusting nature of what alcohol has led to. Now, Neil S. Dow, he's considered the father of Prohibition. He's the mayor of Portland, and he sponsors a Maine law in 1851 to prohibit the manufacture and sale of alcohol. So this is an early prelude to the amendment that goes into the federal constitution. Neil S. Dow, as a labor man, he had observed how much lost time happened at work because of people's stupid drunkenness. So that's what really motivated him to help pass this law. Several states end up following his lead, but even though the law is on the book, it's either ignored, not enforced, or actually repealed soon after. So the same way in the Second Great Awakening, you have people going to these meetings and saying, yes, this is awesome, great, I buy into it. They go back home, they're like, return back to normal self. You get the same thing with the temperance movement as well. So some of the notables of the American Temperance Society, we see Frances Willard and the Beecher family. Of supreme importance is the Beecher family, particularly Catherine Beecher, who's pictured somewhere in here. Don't know which one exactly she is. She's heavily involved in the Temperance Society and trying to ban alcohol, but she is comfortable with her place as a woman and kind of the role that's expected of her in the household. In the same time, she's trying to branch off a little bit and say, well, women should explore the roles of being teachers while maintaining being a good homemaker. In her family, her father is a very famous preacher. We're going to see his name come up a lot. Sister is Harriet Beecher Stowe, who writes Uncle Tom's Cabin, one of the most influential books. When Lincoln meets Harriet Beecher Stowe, he says, oh, so you're the woman who started the Civil War. So keep the Beecher family in mind as we keep moving through these chapters. So what was the impact of temperance movement and temperance societies? Did they actually do anything? Well, if you look at this graph right here, you can see that they absolutely did. So temperance societies formed about 1826, right here. And through the use of brochures, pamphlets, word of mouth, preaching, meetings, standing on a soapbox in a street corner and just screaming out against alcohol, you see the drastic decrease in the consumption of hard liquor. And it stays relatively low and keeps dropping. I mean, where it was just a ridiculous point where things like this, the drunkard's progress, were being illustrated. So this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-step program from the first glass to the grave. Now, if the pixels were a little better, you would be able to notice step 1 starts off as a casual drink. Now, this is suggesting that a man will slowly progress from just a casual drink to games with other fellow social drinkers to making a complete fool out of himself in society, where he turns into a complete idiot and contributes nothing positive to society, where mom and child are left home crying for his foolishness. The most morally significant reform movement with the strongest impact is by far the women's rights movement. In the 19th century, women were supposed to submerge themselves in the home, subordinate themselves to their husband, take part in this cult of domesticity, and just be a homemaker, do chores, raise children. You couldn't vote, and in many instances there were states that said women could even legally be beaten. But they're still better off than Europeans. So this French guy, Alexis de Tocqueville, comes over and he's trying to do like this huge in-depth study of American culture, American values. He's over in America for many, many years, and he penned many influential volumes in a book of his. These books, political science majors still read in college, so they're still absolutely relevant. It's kind of like the outsider looking in at this new democratic experiment to see how it's working. Well, he says in France, rape was only punished lightly, whereas in America it was one of the few crimes punishable by death. Okay, so there's different standards across countries. What's happening with the women's rights movement in America is still way out of whack. But we're going to start getting some slow progression. There's definitely some gender differences. Women are considered physically and emotionally weak, but they're looked at as artistic and refined. They're supposed to be the keepers of society's conscience, which they are fulfilling their role in by leading all these reform movements. It's considered their responsibility to teach the young to be good citizens, hence this cult of domesticity where you are raising the children. Men are supposedly strong and crude, whereas women are supposed to be the protection from becoming too savage or too beastly. So if a man is just all animalistic and crude, maybe he needs the force of a woman in his life to help bring him back down to a more human feature. This at least is the belief during the time. So with these ideas and the Second Great Awakening, it's not hard to see that a lot of people are going to take issue with all these stereotypes and preconceived notions. Notably, you have your list right here of early women's rights reformers: Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, Lucy Stone, Amelia Bloomer. These are just some of the people that we talked about in class so far. Remember, we covered the Seneca Falls Convention. This is in 1848 in upstate New York, where we have the Declaration of Sentiments, which is kind of the spin-off of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. Whereas that document says all men are created equal, this is the word that's going out to the world that says all men and women are created equal. So we saw kind of these arguments that matched up with Thomas Jefferson's complaints about the king in the Declaration. We see the Declaration of Sentiments led by Elizabeth Cady Stanton that penned these issues with the status quo in society and people being comfortable with women's subordinate role. These are kind of the shackles they're trying to cast off on their quest for equality. Unfortunately, equality is just not in the cards in any way, shape, or form right now, and that's because the crusades for women's rights is totally eclipsed and covered up by the campaign against slavery. There's more people on board, this becomes more of a priority, and so it takes over, and women's rights really take a back seat for many, many years. Here's what's going on with women. They're unable to vote. They have a legal status of a minor. You can't own your own property. When you're married, any property control that you did have goes to your husband. You could not initiate divorce. If divorce was to happen, that was your husband's say. You had no say in it whatsoever. You can't make wills, sign a contract, or bring suit in court without a husband's permission. So really, it's kind of this infantile relationship where the husband is really the controlling force. And if you read The Great Awakening by Kate Chopin, you will see the parallels of the type of relationship that women had with men they were subservient to. The real fear by men in society was that if women had the right to vote, if they had equality, if they had their own way, if they had any type of say in anything whatsoever, that this would change the way things are in society. And the fear is that we'd actually get a complete flip in the way society operated. Whereas women were supposed to be the homemakers, doing the chores, doing needlework, and taking care of babies, that if they had their way, that they would be out and about in town, strolling around in carriages, and men would be left at home to do this. Well, since men at the time are in power, they realize this fear and say, we need to stop this. We need to block women's equality because we don't want to be in the sphere of home.